Hello and welcome to Flix and Chill with me, Luke. And today I have with me somebody I admire, as he's one of the most eloquent people I've ever met and read his reviews. So I'm pleased to announce Heath Lynch is here with me.
Thanks for having me, Luke. I'm honored that you think I'm so eloquent. I I don't know what to say. I'm kind of speechless. I hope to completely disappoint all the listeners and be as ineloquent as I possibly can.
No, it's fascinating to me. For me, it's fascinating because obviously we've met through Sift Pop or get to know each other because I never actually met any of you in real life due to
Sure.
the location. And ever since I start to, follow most or all of you on Letterboxd and I read your stuff, I'm like, wow, this guy knows how to, many times we agree, many times we don't, but no matter what, you know exactly how to word yourself so nobody has any questions about, oh, this is why he didn't like this movie or this is why he loved this movie. And I really admire that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've always had a real passion for film and for
Hmm.
writing, and so writing about film is just the natural hybrid for me that I
Hmm.
really enjoy that intersection. And I really love being descriptive in my analysis or point of view on film as well, because I think that's the best way to foster not
Hmm.
just dialogue and have people, having conversations about what makes it interesting, but to foster ambition and to
Hmm.
foster passion is to say, oh, if someone is writing this thoroughly about something, it gets other people thinking about it more in depth than maybe they previously weren't, or even just outside of film, like, man, if this guy's writing about film this way, what about the hobbies that I actually like? What if I started dissecting them that way? I just think that's what makes life enjoyable between the 9 to 5 and all that. It's finding passion in the hobbies and things that you love. So no, I thank you. I genuinely take that as a compliment, and I do try to be very clear. And if I like something, I'll explain why I like it. If I don't like something, I'll explain why I don't like it. And we don't always have to agree or disagree. And I think that's part of the fun. It's part of the dialogue.
100%, 100%. So why movies? What got you into movies? Was it a specific person or was it yourself?
Um, I got into film back in the 90s. It was a combination of several factors. So, uh, one is my dad is just a big movie person. There were
Hmm.
always movies on in the background when dad was home. Now, my dad back then, 80s, 90s, dads maybe weren't around as much.
Hmm.
That was just kind of the stereotype, but it was a stereotype for a reason. My dad traveled. He was a salesman. My mom was at home and she was a teacher, taking care of us most of the weeknights, and my dad would be home on the weekends. But
Hmm.
when dad was home, movies were on. And when I was home, it eventually got to the point that movies were on because I
Hmm.
just loved watching movies. So that was part of it. Another part of it is that my grandfather on my mother's side um, was in commercial and
Okay.
advertisements, and he would work with a lot of film people,
Mm.
get some big stars or even sometimes bigger directors to do commercials for him. And he did commercials. Primarily, what he's known for, or what he was known for, was working for General Motors and Ford and doing car commercials. But he did so much more than that.
Hmm.
And uh, and so just kind of hearing his stories and how he loved film, and I always found that interesting. And he would have all these wild tales of who he met and
Hmm.
who was really an asshole behind the scenes or who was really cool. And I just found that interesting. And then the third element of it was that I don't even know where this started, to be completely frank, but
Hmm.
my family has always loved the Oscars.
Okay.
We find it very fascinating. I on my letterbox profile, I have it in the bio. The
Yep.
Oscars are a holiday in my house, and that's very true. And it has been for most of my memory.
Hmm.
At least since like 95, 96. I wasn't even 10 years old yet. I
Hmm.
turned 10 in 96. That it was just a thing, and we put wagers on it. Back then, it was just $1 because I was a kid. You just
Yep.
here's 4 quarters that I just have in a drawer. Everyone puts in $1, and you make your picks, and whoever got the most picks right, well,
Hmm.
winner take all. And it was a
Hmm.
family of, with grandparents, it was like $6 was on the line, but still, it was fun, and it got me into movies more and watching more movies, so I could. Another thing my family is known for is being really competitive. So it was just like,
Hmm.
no, I want to be the one to win. I need to know more. So that was like the foundation, the impetus of everything. And that just naturally evolved to the point that when I grew up and I got into high school and college, like I was not a party person. I didn't like drinking. I didn't care for going out. Like that was just not my scene. I like
Hmm.
to be more introverted and reclusive and to watch film. And so that's what I did. And it got to the point that not even just within my family, but within my friend group,
Hmm.
people knew me as the movie guy. Like that was just, oh, Heath knows movies, or he watches a lot of movies. Or if a new movie's out and you haven't seen it yet and you want to know is it good, go ask Heath, because
Hmm.
odds are he's seen it and he at least has a take on it. And that probably started in like 98, 99, and really transitioned pretty heavily in like the early 2000s when I was graduating high school.
Hmm.
And um, that stuck with me. And then in '04, this thing called the Facebook uh, started going global on to a whole bunch of different universities, including my own at the time.
Hmm.
And I started writing. Nowadays, you'd call them like letterbox size reviews, but like little reviews on Facebook. Not for every movie I ever saw by any stretch, but just like if a movie really struck me and I had a lot of feelings about it, either positive or negative, I'd just rant. I'd go on a little soapbox. I'd type up a blurb or whatever, and I kind of just did that for 15 years, off and on. Every once in a while, a friend would have me on a podcast or something.
Hmm.
And it was really in the pandemic that things started shifting towards, I should just start doing this not full time as in a profession, as in a job, quitting my day job because it certainly doesn't pay the bills, but I should put more energy into it. I should try to make this more of a thing, and maybe someday it could pay the bills because at least I love this. This is it's beyond just like something I do on the side. This is a passion. It's probably the biggest element of my life outside of my family and friends,
Hmm.
that I love movies. I love film. I love watching movies and film. I love talking about movies and film. I love analyzing movies and film. I love award season for as much as it pisses me off from time to
Yeah.
time. And so that was kind of like the journey from inception point to where I am now, where now I write for uh, three, four different websites.
Hmm.
I've guested on numerous podcasts. I have a podcast of my own now. I hope to launch a YouTube channel later this year, and we'll just see how the journey continues. But for right now, that's where things stand.
Nice. That's a great backstory, to be honest. What struck me is, so with your grandfather, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
you are you, would you like to mention, as he said, he's worked with many people, some good, some bad. Would you like to mention some highlights? Like, let's say we can focus on mainly the best rather than the worst, if you want.
You know, I don't even know if I have
Mm-hmm.
names to give you
Oh, that's fine.
because, frankly, he doesn't talk about that
Mm-hmm.
time much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he retired so long ago. I'm pretty sure he retired close to 20 years ago. So he just doesn't talk about that. Like I heard those stories more in the 90s or early
Mm-hmm.
2000s, and my memory is kind of bad. So that's 20 plus years ago, and it's not all. I remember some of his commercials more than I remember who was in them
Okay.
or how they were done. I'm sure if I went to YouTube and I found some, I could
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, that's so and so. I particularly remember, the only one I really remember is something about a bull in a china shop, and I think he worked with not Dion, Barry Sanders of the Detroit Lions NFL football team at the time.
Mm-hmm.
uh, which obviously that's not a Hollywood person,
Yeah.
but still, like that, for whatever reason, that one stuck in my head is they they compared. Barry Sanders to a bull running through a china shop because he's a running back, and they somehow made the analogy to like Ford trucks or something. It was weird.
Oh.
Anyway, but I don't know. I could ask him. I'll maybe try to find some stories,
Hmm.
see if I can get some out of him. But he doesn't really talk about it anymore these days.
No, I understand. I understand. So when you mention your dad, right? So
Yep.
would is it fair to say he was one of the most influential figures when it comes to getting you into movies?
Oh yeah, for sure. Into a lot of things.
Hmm.
Even to this day, the primary way that I relate to my father is through probably one of three ways. Either one, talking about family
Hmm.
and family related things, two, talking about film, or three, talking about sports.
Hmm.
And all those are because my dad is a big family person who loves film and he loves sports.
Hmm.
Um, and to this day, like I'll still go check out movies with him. Now it's unfortunate my father had a stroke a little over a year ago, and he survived. You know,
Hmm.
he's still with us, and that's great. But it's definitely damaged his memory.
Hmm.
It's incredibly difficult for him to retain short-term memory at this point. So, like, we went and saw Killers of the Flower Moon in October when it came out in theaters here in the States.
Hmm.
And we went opening weekend. He couldn't remember it. He had
Yeah.
no idea that he saw that with me. A 3.5 hour movie. He completely blocked it out. And that was like 3 months ago, you know.
Hmm.
So that's a little scary,
Yeah.
to kind of know that I'm losing the opportunity to make new memories that my father will retain.
Hmm.
However, with that said, for decades we would watch film together, we would go to movies together. You know, we used to get in debates about who is the best and what year of film was the best. It was also kind of fun at trivia nights because, again, like I said earlier, my family's competitive, and my father um, is I get that from my dad, and we would go to family trivia nights,
Hmm.
and anytime there was a movie category, oh, we aced it because my
Yeah.
dad could do anything from like the late 40s up to like the late 80s. And then from the late 80s to now, I had that covered. So between the two of us, we knew everything. We knew who won what awards. We knew
Hmm.
what did well at the box office. I mean, we could do it all. It
You
was
were
real
unstoppable.
fun. But yeah, so, to this day, like I love James Bond movies. I would even say James Bond is my favorite film franchise of all time.
Hmm.
And I get that because my dad and my another grandpa of mine loved James Bond.
Hmm.
I remember in the 90s, one of my favorite Christmas gifts that I would get year after year was I'd get more James Bond VHS tapes.
Oh.
And I would get them in like three or four every year
Hmm.
until I had the whole collection, which took years to get. But it was just great. It's like, oh my gosh, four new Bond adventures. And I would watch those tapes, those VHS tapes. I'd run them until they didn't work anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, and I would watch them all year until next Christmas when there's grandpa with three, four, some one year it was even five brand new Bond films. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, it's the best. So, uh, I got that from my dad. My love of sports films I get from my dad. My love of historical epics and war films. He sees it more from, I hate to be crass or crude, but like a jingoistic kind of way,
Hmm.
just due to my father and I have very different political affiliations. I view war films more as a reflection of humanity's failings.
Hmm.
But even still, even with us coming at them in different ways, we still appreciate watching them together. And if anything, it leads to interesting conversation after the fact. So, yeah, to this day, there's a lot that I enjoy because of my father.
That's understandable. And it's yeah. I have a feeling I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. What is the favorite movie your dad introduced you to?
That my dad introduced me to,
Mm-hmm.
that would be my favorite movie of all time, and that's Saving Private Ryan. Going
Oh,
back
okay.
to war films,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are plenty of films that could be described as the best film, and I'm not saying that Saving Private Ryan is objectively the best film.
Mm-hmm.
However, subjectively, to me, I consider Saving Private Ryan to be my favorite, to me, the greatest film ever made. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is a vehement anti-war film, and I will have that debate with anyone any day of the week. I know there's some people that are like, no, it's very pro-war, and I'm like, you did not understand this film then, because it's very clearly anti-war.
Yeah.
But it's not just that it's anti-war, it's that it's visceral and visually stunning in a way that's hard to watch, that
Mm-hmm.
really recontextualize how war films would be shot. You watch a war film before Saving Private Ryan versus after Saving Private Ryan, and it is a markedly different experience because of that film.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's some of the best cinematography that's ever been put to film. Undoubtedly, some of the best sound design. I love the original score. I think those are some of the best performances. I think the story, even in its jingoism, has this weird sensibility of, if there was ever going, the old tried and true about World War II, if there ever was such a thing as a moral war, it is
Mm-hmm.
World War II, because stopping the Holocaust and stopping the Nazis, that it doesn't get much stronger of a cause than that. And this film kind of takes that to task. And even at that, it still says, yeah, I'm not even sure if it was worth it still.
Mm-hmm.
It was more just that we were kind of forced into it, because there was no other option at that point because the Nazis were so extreme. But so much of that film, I think, is emotionally provocative, thematically stirring. Uh, it's just contextually rich in a way that few films ever are.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that film for the first time on VHS. It
Mm-hmm.
was too long of a film to fit on one VHS, so it was a double VHS tape, and I watched that with my father. So
Mm-hmm.
I would have probably seen it like, I don't know, 40, 50 times now. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's my favorite film of all time. And that's directly because of my dad.
That's awesome. I don't think many people would argue against that pick because that's an excellent movie. I remember
Mm-hmm.
seeing it first time in like on a Czech national TV, and I remember back in the day there was a huge debate about whether kids or even like young adults should watch it because of the opening sequence of, the D-Day stuff. And I was just adamant to watch it. So I did, and my mom was shocked because yeah, at the time when it aired, I want to say it was like 2002, something like that. It was still like something we were not used to, this level of violence, this level of bloodshed, and how
Mm-hmm.
real, as you said, how real it felt. Just, this feels more than a movie. This feels real.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, very famously,
mhm,
uh, again, due to machismo and patriotism morphed into nationalism or whatever you want to have it,
mhm,
uh, a lot of people that enjoy war films are typically people that are pro-war,
mhm,
and people that are veterans even. But very famously, a lot of World War II veterans went out to see Saving Private Ryan for that very reason, because they thought it would be right up their alley.
mhm.
But the opening sequence, the D-Day sequence, which is really only about 15 to 20 minutes, it is not as long as you think,
Yeah.
but it feels like it's forever because it's
Mhm,
so visceral and
mhm.
so brutal. And very famously, people walked out of the theater, like
Yeah.
veterans started
Mhm,
vomiting and throwing up and passing out, and people had to leave. And like the veterans affairs committee was getting phone calls for weeks after that film came out because it was so difficult to watch.
mhm.
And and again, it changed war films for forever. So yeah, it's my dad has had a profound impact on my film career. To this day, I think one of our favorite debates is what is the best year in film ever. And I still don't even know my answer. I usually say 1999. Um, but my dad is so adamant. He's always like, it's 1967, Heath. It's 1967. You have The Graduate, you have In the
Mhm.
Heat of the Night, you have Bonnie and Clyde. Guess who's coming to dinner? You have The Dirty Dozen. just it's 1967 Heath, and I'm
Hmm.
like, okay. But to this day, those are still kind of some of the conversations that we have, and it's just fun.
Yeah, yeah, that 67. That's actually good. Yeah, that's a good. I
No,
think
it's a great year.
it's
I
a
don't
great
think it's the
year. Your
best
dad has
year.
a point. I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure if I mean, like, but 99 though. 99. Yeah, that's a great year for movies.
probably
So,
for me, it'd probably be either like 99,
hmm
like 75. I
hmm
think it's maybe 77.
yeah.
Uh, 92 is not bad.
I know many people like 94.
2015, I'm a fan of.
Hmm
2019,
hmm
there's a lot, but my dad is adamant every time we have the conversation. Heath at 67. Why do we keep talking about this?
Yeah, when people discuss the best year in a movie, for movies, many people reference 1994 because obviously you get like Shawshank Redemption, you get Pulp Fiction, you get, Forrest Gump, all those like major movies. And yeah, from the very recent ones, 2019 has been excellent movie year. And I would even go as far as to say 2022 was an absolutely spectacular year for movies. And I don't think, I think 10 years from now, we'll appreciate that year much more as to
Yeah.
everything that's came out in that year. So besides movies, right?
hmm
What would you say you are about? So if I were to ask, give me your basic bio of who Heath is. So, we know, both of us are movie lovers. That's,
hmm
obvious. But besides movies, what is it you're about? What do you
Um,
like? What do you dislike?
yeah, yeah. So I am a big family person,
Hmm
or at least I try my best to be. I'm married. My wife Emily and I have two kids. One is my stepdaughter from my wife's previous marriage. I have a 9-year old stepdaughter, and then I have a 3-year old daughter that we had during the pandemic.
Okay.
Um, I love my family to death. I try to spend as much time with them as I can. Luckily, my job is incredibly lenient and flexible with its work-life balance and time management that I can spend a lot of time with them, which is terrific. Um, so they're priority number one for me. Although if you saw my letterbox, you probably wouldn't know it because I log so many damn movies. But that's because my job is really cool and I have a triple monitor set up, and two of them are for work, and then one of them I can watch movies while I work all day. And no
Nice.
one at the office cares. My boss doesn't care. So that's pretty nice. But yeah, I love my family to death. So
hmm
they are my everything. Outside of that, movies is probably my number one hobby. My next biggest thing is sports. I am a big sports person.
hmm
Um, uh, I am from St. Louis, Missouri, so that includes the local teams. I'm a St. Louis Cardinals baseball fan, St. Louis Blues hockey fan. As of recently, St. Louis City SC soccer or
Okay.
football, depending on where you are, fan.
hmm
We just got them this past year in 2023 was that was their inaugural season in the MLS.
hmm
I used to be an NFL fan until the NFL fucking stole our team.
hmm
I will never forgive them for that. I thought I would be over it by now, considering they stole the team away in 2016 and we're nearing a decade, and I'm still not over it, not even close. So I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to be a bitter old man and like I'll just be a vegetable, a macabre force that just roams the earth, and I'll still be cursing out the NFL and Rob Manfred, not Rob Manfred, that's baseball's commissioner, Roger Goodell, and Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams. So that's a big stain on me.
hmm
But no, I love sports. I'm very passionate about especially blues hockey.
hmm
When we won the Stanley Cup back in 2019, it was one of the highlights of my life. Um, which may sound droll, but it's true. um, and then outside of that, I also really love uh, games.
Okay.
This could be board games, card games, video games. Again, this goes back to my competitive element. I used to play competitive Magic the Gathering, and I used to like go around the country on the Grand Prix tour. I was never like good. You're not going to find me in rankings, but I was like, I was better than the local community store you'd find in your city.
Yeah.
And so I'd go and I'd play in the Grand Prix circuit every once in a while, and I'd get my butt kicked by people way better than me, but it was
Mhm.
damn fun and I enjoyed it. I still play Magic every once in a while, although with the pandemic, it just became too expensive to because Magic cards are not cheap. I don't know
Yeah.
if people know that if they play Magic the Gathering. For those who do play, they are well aware, but it's not a cheap hobby. So it just wasn't cost efficient to keep doing that. But I also love like board games. I play board games. We have board game nights with friends and family all the
Mhm.
time. Uh, Speaking of family, that's another thing we try to do is board game nights. I also recently built a theater in my house, like a
Ooh.
multi-story, multi-leveled, tiered stadium seating set up with multiple couches and a projection screen. So I have friends and family over for like movie nights and stuff. Like, the Oscars are coming up. We'll have people over to watch the Oscars, and that will be fun. So
Hmm.
those are some of the things that I enjoy,
All right. All right.
what I occupy my time with.
Yeah. I remember the pictures of your theater at home because you
Mhm.
posted them in our in the Six Pop Slack, and it was
Yeah.
so fucking cool. I was like, this guy knows how to live a life. I was like, damn.
It was surprisingly more efficient than people would think. We built the whole thing for less than $200.
Hmm.
Um, Now that's not counting the additional furniture, mind you,
Yeah.
and the projector, which I already had. I'm
Hmm.
I'm just talking like the tiered setup for multiple stadium seating levels of seating. And I thought it was going to be much more expensive than that, but it wasn't. So yay.
Nice. So you said you're based in St. Louis. So
Yep.
if I were to tell you, look, I'm going there for a week, what are some places I need to see? What are some places I need to visit? What are some places I need to grab a meal? What would you recommend?
Sure. So the number one place that I always recommend these days is something called the City Museum.
Mm-hmm.
This is downtown. If you go to Google Maps, search City Museum, you'll find it. But this is not a museum like you would picture in
Mm-hmm.
your head. There's no art hanging on the wall. There's nothing that you can't keep your hands on where it's like, oh, step back and watch this performance or something. Nope. The art is the building, and the building is a giant playground. And I'm not joking when I say that. It is about 10 stories tall, and the entire building has been turned into a living work of art that people just climb all over.
Oh.
It is interconnected between floors. At one point, there's like a 7-story slide that you can go down. It's really fun. Kind of hurts, but it's fun. You can go inside, you can go outside. There's giant ball pits, but it's all like sculptures. It's like, oh, this part is a giant whale that you can
Mm-hmm.
walk through the whale's mouth and like climb up. And then there's like a giant tree of life. And
Mm-hmm.
then they have like caverns and caves that they've like crafted stalactites and stalagmites to look like a cave, but also then there's like lizard creatures in the cave. So like everything about the building and the structure is art,
Mm-hmm.
but they encourage you to climb on it. Like it's literally a play place for adults. There's kids there as well, but it's more aimed at like teenagers and young adults. I would say up until like your 40s.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it's just harder to climb around. Um, you'll get sore real fast,
Yeah.
but they sell like craft beer there and pizza. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like my favorite place to take people because when you say museum in your head, this is so very much not what you would picture. But when you get there, you're like, oh no, it is a museum. There's art everywhere, but they just encourage you to climb all over it. It's really
Nice.
fun. Um, the next thing is the St. Louis Zoo. We have
Mm-hmm.
the number one rated zoo in the country. Most people
Ooh.
assume because it was for years that it's the San Diego Zoo, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
the case, and it hasn't been for a while. The St. Louis Zoo is built in Forest Park, um, which is think of it like Central Park on Manhattan
Mm-hmm.
Island. It's our Central Park in the middle of St. Louis, downtown St. Louis. We call it Forest Park, and it's I think it's actually technically bigger than Central Park. It is huge. And that's where the 1904 World's Fair was hosted when St. Louis had the World's Fair. And this
Hmm.
zoo was built then. So there's some original structures from 1904 still together in this zoo. But this zoo is fantastic. And what's really cool is it's completely free. It's one of the only zoos in the entire world that's completely free to the public. They never
Hmm.
charge and they never have. It's one of the greatest gifts that we have as taxpayers, and I love contributing to it. Another one still in Forest Park. I love taking people to the Municipal Theater, what we just call the Muni. It is the largest outdoor theater in North America.
Hmm.
Um, I don't remember how many seats are there. I'm pretty sure it's like over 12,000. Like it's a
Wow.
significant number.
Hmm.
And all summer long, they do musicals and they put on stage performances. My wife and I have season tickets. We go to every show all summer long. It is a blast. And they get good stuff too. They usually get stuff off of Broadway to come. Uh, if you just search the Muni, you'll find it on Google. I know this year they're coming with Les Mis, Dreamgirls, The Little Mermaid, Fiddler on the Roof, Waitress, In the Heights, Anything Goes. That's the kind of stuff that we get there. So that's really cool. We also have a really great botanical gardens. In terms of a traditional museum, we have a really great art museum,
Hmm.
which is also in Forest Park. Forest Park is huge. And we have a history museum that's also in Forest Park. And then, of course, the more traditional thing is we have the arch that most people have seen in pictures or whatever, the Gateway Arch,
Hmm.
which is, I think, still the tallest monument in the nation, might be. Um, it's kind of one of those things where living here, it's not that fun. Like all the other things I just mentioned, even living here are fun, and we do them over and over.
Hmm.
But the arch is kind of like a one and done thing. And
Yeah.
if you live here, you don't really care. But I know that people love to do it when they are coming in and visiting. So,
Hmm.
in terms of places to eat, right across the highway from Forest Park downtown, there's a couple sections worth going to. One is called Dogtown, which has a
Hmm.
lot of great Irish food, which is really nice. And then there's another section, another neighborhood called The Hill, which is really, really good Italian food.
Okay.
Uh, so those are a couple things that we're known for. In terms of specific food items, what we're known for is that we do frozen custards. We don't really do ice cream. It's instead of like soft serve ice cream as you picture it, it's just much, much thicker and tougher
Hmm.
to the point that they're known for when they put your ice cream, your concrete in the cup, they'll turn it upside down to show you that the ice cream won't fall out. And they'll just hold it there and be like, look, this is a good concrete. It's not falling out, it's not going anywhere. And I think it just tastes amazing. We also do something called gooey butter cake, which is kind of just what it sounds like. It's a cake that's way more butter infused and it's much creamier.
Hmm.
We are also very known for uh, our pizza, which a lot of people think is disgusting. Essentially, if you're from St. Louis, you love it because you were
Hmm.
raised on it to some degree. And if you're not from St. Louis, you're going to hate it. But it is cracker thin. Like think thin crust. When you order thin crust pizza, it's thinner than that. It literally, like there are people that describe it as you're eating a cracker. It is that thin.
Wow.
And we don't use mozzarella, we use provolone cheese. So
Okay.
it's just very different. Again, if you're from here, you love it. If you're not
Hmm.
from here, most people hate it, and that's fine. And then we also do toasted ravioli, which is another thing that we're known for.
Hmm.
We will toast ravioli, and oh, so good, so good. So those are some St. Louis things, and of course, just sporting events. This is a big sports town.
Hmm.
Cardinals, baseball, Blues, hockey, city soccer, um, any of those you could have a ball of a time at.
Yeah. I don't think I ever heard of San Luis pizza, to be honest. Like like I've never been to America, right? So, but even
Mm-hmm.
I have heard of like Chicago style pizza or New
Yeah.
York style pizza or all those, but I don't think I ever heard of St. Louis style pizza.
Oh
So,
yeah. It's definitely in the States it's more of a thing. I'm
mhm,
not entirely shocked that you haven't heard of it. But like of the major styles of pizza, there's like New York style, there's Detroit, there's Chicago, there's St. Louis. Those are some of the big, distinctly different styles in
Hmm.
America.
So I take it that's your personal favorite, the St. Louis one?
Out of those styles, yeah, St. Louis,
Okay.
followed by New York, then Detroit, and then Chicago. I hate Chicago style pizza. Also, St. Louis and Chicago just kind of hate each other. Oh, we've been bred to hate each other. The St. Louis Cardinals are in the same division as the Chicago Cubs and
Hmm.
have been for forever. The St. Louis Blues are in the same division as the Chicago Blackhawks and have been for forever.
Hmm.
It feels like not actually forever, but so for like we have massive sports rivalries.
Hmm.
We've we're kind of the little brother, the annoying little brother to Chicago. A long time ago, some politicians made some really stupid fucking decisions, and instead of allowing the transcontinental railroad to go through St. Louis and build a hub here in St. Louis, our politicians decided that nope, steamboat power is still going to be the number one resource for trade and transit and economic movement through the country. So
Hmm.
we are fine with our steamboats on the Mississippi River, completely missing the boat, pun intended,
Uh,
on the
nice.
fact that, yeah, no, you can only do so much trade on one stationary river, but trains can go anywhere. And
Hmm.
Chicago jumped at our faux pas and they became the central hub of the country. And at one point, St. Louis was quite bigger than Chicago. And then that happened. And then Chicago was way bigger than St. Louis and has been ever since. And
Hmm.
so we have kind of been a little brother to Chicago for decades and very bitter about our past politicians being idiots. And our city has suffered for it. But
Hmm.
yeah, so for many reasons, boo Chicago. But uh, one of the good ones to boo them for is certainly their pizza. I think their pizza is disgusting, but that's just me.
So if we learn one thing from, everything you said about St. Louis is boo Chicago.
Yeah, boo Chicago, and I'm sure Chicago will boo us too. So it's a love hate mutual thing.
I got you. I got you. So let's play a quick game of this or that. It's simple. I'll give you two options, and you tell me which would you prefer. And these go from anywhere from quite simple and interesting to philosophical. So let's see what we got. So Heath, tea or coffee?
Neither.
Neither. Fair
I
enough.
don't drink tea. I don't drink coffee.
Just
That
water for
is
you.
that is a straight. I drink water and I drink lemonade and I drink soda sometimes,
Okay.
and that is it. I actually hate the taste of tea and coffee. But if I
That's
had to pick one just to be around, I would pick
mm,
coffee because I at least love the smell of coffee. Like I'll buy coffee scented candles,
mm,
but I won't drink either of those.
that's perfectly fine. Money or free time?
Money because money can buy free time. Free
Mm-hmm.
time can't buy money. Unfortunately, I don't really like the system that we're in
Mm-hmm.
any way, any stretch. But I am old enough to know that money is the correct answer there. That's like an objective correct answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Honesty or other people's feelings?
Honesty.
All right. To be fair, I kind of presumed that from you because you're a
Yeah.
straight talking guy, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'll try to say things in a polite fashion because I'm
mm-hmm.
not out to hurt someone's feelings. I'm
No, of
certainly not
course.
trying to be rude, but I'm not going to sugarcoat things either. I'm not if I feel a certain way, I'll say it.
And again, that's why we love you. That's it.
That's why some people love me. Thanks, Luke.
So, summer or winter?
Summer. I
Right?
fucking hate winter. I hate the cold.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it is, I think, 8 degrees outside with a wind chill making it minus 20 something. And that's
Mm-hmm.
Fahrenheit. And it's fucking miserable. I can't stand it. I actually used to work as a summer camp counselor for 5 years.
Mm.
So being out in like 90, 95, or even 100-degree Fahrenheit weather is, I wouldn't say it's fine. It's not like it's something I thoroughly enjoy and it's fun, but like I can deal with that. That's tolerable to me. But
Mm-hmm.
this kind of cold is not, especially and even more than the temperature, I get like seasonal depression. I hate it when there's not sunlight.
Yeah.
Getting dark at like 4:45 in the afternoon after I just got out of work and got the kids home, and the kids haven't even gotten a chance to go outside and play or get energy out. And we're immediately like, well, I guess we're just inside the rest of the night again.
Hmm.
It's just, it limits what kind of activities you can do. It's so dark and depressing. Oh, I hate everything about winter.
That's fair. See, speaking of summer, actually, a bit of a side question. What
Mm-hmm.
are summers like in St. Louis? Because, like, it's Missouri. So, from my understanding, I would imagine it would be kind of like hot, but the kind of like a damp hot, like over the summer.
It
Would I
is
be correct?
incredibly damp. It
Mm,
is very humid here because we're,
mm,
especially St. Louis, we're at the intersection of the two biggest rivers of the continent. We have the
okay.
Mississippi River, the number one biggest river, and the Missouri River is the
Hmm.
number two river, and they collide just north of St. Louis.
Hmm.
So it gets humid as shit here. It
Hmm.
is sticky and swampy, and it's not always enjoyable by any stretch of the imagination. But
Hmm.
again, I'll take the heat over the bone splintering cold any day.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm in the same boat as you, to be honest.
Yeah, because at least in the heat, I can choose to go inside if I want to, but if I want
Hmm.
to stay outside and do activities, I at least have that option. Whereas in the cold, you don't. I can
Hmm.
still drink a lot of water, try to like keep myself cool and be in fans, or I can go swimming, or like there's so many activities you can do. In the
Yeah.
winter, it's just like go be miserable for 3.5 months. It's terrible.
Or you can build a snowman.
No, fuck that.
So now, free will or destiny?
Free will, destiny's not real.
You heard it here first.
No,
Ninjas or pirates?
pirates.
Oh, why?
Um, I, 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 I think that there's more freedom of opportunity with pirates. They can
Hmm.
kind of do more.
Hmm.
Ninjas are much more structured. It's almost
Okay.
like a form of a religion.
Okay.
Especially if you go, not that samurai are ninjas; those are two separate things, but
Yeah.
they're linked in some ways. They have a lot of
Mhm.
similar cultural aesthetics in terms of their training, in terms of their livelihoods and methodologies, and it's just the samurai, the ninja, even monks, these are much more reserved individuals that are very structured in many ways. And pirates are kind of like, no, I'm gonna just live life. I'm gonna do whatever and go have fun. And if I want to do this, I'm gonna. And
Yeah.
that just seems more exciting. A world without rules.
You're the first person I had on this podcast that answered pirates, so nice.
Yeah,
Finally. Finally
I'm the only
somebody.
one with a brain. That's how that's gonna work.
Damn, shots fired.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, ninjas are damn cool, but like
Hmm.
I'd much rather enjoy the freedom to do whatever as a pirate, to sail the seas, to plunder
Hmm.
gold. I mean, you get to hunt treasure. I mean, come on. Come
That
on.
is
What are
true.
we talking about?
And the last question for this section would be time travel twice or teleport infinite times?
Time travel
Twice.
twice,
Hmm. Or
or
teleport infinite
just
times.
have the power of teleportation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm taking teleportation. I don't even think that's close. Like
Hmm.
time traveling is fun, but really time traveling in a capitalistic economy and society that we live in, you really only use that for two reasons. Either one, you just want to go see some historical event that already happened, which,
Hmm.
okay, cool. You go see the event and then you come back. You didn't really gain anything from that. Or two, you do it to like financially benefit yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I'll go back in time, do this one thing different, and then, I'll come back to where I am and then I have the money to do whatever. But if you can teleport indefinitely, you just have that power, you're fine on money as it is because you can teleport inside a bank vault, take as much as you want, and teleport out of there, and they're never finding you, and you're fine. So
Hmm.
financially speaking, you're fine. I can go read about historical events or go watch videos of them or whatever, and that's cool. But I tell you what, if I could just like teleport and be like, oh, I just feel like going to Paris, like now, boom, you're
Yeah.
there. Or like, you know what, I really want to visit Tokyo, boom, you're there.
Hmm.
Or like I again, I don't even think that one's close. Teleportation for sure.
Nice. All right.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, you never need a car again. Save so much money on
that's the
gas.
thing.
Jesus.
That's the thing. And for people like me who, who has family living in well, it's the same continent, but it's, quite far away from me. Yeah,
Mhm.
teleportation would come in handy. That's
Yeah, going to
100%.
visit people, even like mundane stuff like, okay, I got to get to work.
Yeah.
Oh, I can
Poof.
sleep like 30 minutes later because I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
get ready as early and then just boom, you teleport right at work. Or like, oh, this movie's starting. Oh, but I can't make it because it starts in 10 minutes and the theater is 25 minutes away. Not a
Mm-hmm.
problem anymore. Teleport and you still have time for popcorn before
Yep.
the trailers even start. Like, that's not even close. Teleportation all day.
Nice. Nice. And what about, do you have some hot takes or unpopular opinion you're willing to share?
So I I have some movie hot takes. We're gonna
Okay.
do one now and one later.
All right.
This is a more genre-based movie hot take, and I don't know if it's entirely a hot take because I know there's people that feel this way,
Mm-hmm.
but I know there are also people that are gonna think I'm crazy, and that is that historical epics, historical romances, historical dramas, and primarily British leaning, although not exclusively,
Mm-hmm.
those more movies are vastly overrated, if not entirely useless and boring.
Hmm.
I'm talking best picture winning Out of Africa, best picture winner The English Patient,
Mm-hmm.
best picture nominees Howard's End or The Remains of the Day or A Room with a View. Sense and Sensibility. And I'm not even saying that these are like inherently bad movies. In fact, I even like Howard's End, which is a
Mm-hmm.
movie I just listed. I even give it a 4 out of 5. I think that's a great film. But for the love of God, if I could go the rest of my life never watching another movie like this ever again, I would be thrilled. Because as much as people that love those movies may not want to admit, although some of them I think can be self aware enough to admit it, those movies are generally boring as shit. They're incredibly slow, monotonous. The dialogue is not as heavy as you think, and
Mm-hmm.
it relies on a lot of subtle performances that, while still intricate and interesting, are just not very compelling. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you have like crazy shit happen, like in the room with the view when three guys strip naked and just like go swimming in like a lagoon in the middle of the woods together, like just random shit like that. You're like, oh, okay, sure, this is at least different. Like other than that, these movies are just largely boring, especially when it feels like a recounting of events in slow motion, like a passage to India. Just like, oh my God, why these movies, they don't need to be that long. Out of Africa does not need to be that long. Um, and if they are going to be that long, damn it, at least make it more compelling than this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I say that as someone as I respect these technical achievements, I respect these performances, I respect what these films are trying to achieve, but inherently I can only enjoy them so much just because the movies are so slow paced
Mm-hmm.
and not like in a fun character slow burn kind of sensibility, but they're just slow paced due to the narrative plot structure,
Mm-hmm.
and I just lose interest after a while. So almost all of these types of movies become eat your vegetable homework type movies, and I can't stand that. I hate those kind of movies. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's
that
definitely
is
not a,
my hot take. That
yeah.
I know that some people will probably agree and be like, yeah, fuck those movies, they are boring. But I know there's a lot of people that love those films that are gonna be like, Heath, you're fucking crazy.
It's definitely not a hot take on this podcast, but I know what you're talking about because look, I've always said I don't have like one genre of movies I would hate because I try to watch every single movie ever made because
Yep,
that's who I am. However, I've often said the, long time ago pretty dresses kind of era of movies
yep.
would probably be bottom of my list of, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to watch this one too. Because yeah, as you said, most of the time there's always, a problem we kind of figured out in modern society, like, oh, she cannot get married to this person because he's not nobleman or vice versa. What will they
Mhm.
do? And I'm like, I understand these were the concerns like 200, 300 years ago, right? But it just feels, as you said, it just mostly feels not paced well. So where most of them are 2.5 hours long, and I'm like, okay, like the camera work is usually stunning, the costumes are usually stunning. As you said, the
Oh
performances.
yeah, There's plenty of things,
Hmm.
and what's crazy is again a lot of those movies I listed, I don't even give them bad scores because I
Hmm.
recognize all of those
Hmm.
technical achievements.
Hmm.
I know that they're colloquially called costume dramas because they're period piece historical costume films,
Hmm.
and that's what they're kind of about. And like I can appreciate them for what they are from a film aesthetic, from
Hmm.
a film achievement point of view, but I'm talking strictly from an entertainment point of
Yeah,
view.
yeah.
These films are just not entertaining.
Hmm.
And anyone who tells me that they love these kinds of films and they think there's like some of the most entertaining and gripping shit, and I'm like, I don't believe you. Like I don't. I'm sorry. Like I especially now I've been going through for years now. I've been going through every month and doing research on a different year. I started with 1975 and I'm up to 1996 right now.
Hmm.
Um, for an Oscar article I do where it's a retrospective on Oscars history.
Hmm.
And so that includes rewatching a lot of these movies. And literally every time one of these movies is on my list to watch the next month, I'm like, oh god damn it. Like and I push it off and I procrastinate. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll save it to the end. I'll do something else first. And then it gets like inevitably it's usually one of the last few movies I have to watch because like fuck, I have to bite the bullet. I finally have to watch this now. I
Hmm.
hope I don't hate it. And like I try to come in as optimistic as possible. And I'll be like, oh my God, look who directed this. Oh no, like this person is in this and that person.
Hmm.
This has Meryl Streep and that has Anthony Hopkins and all this stuff. And then inevitably 20 minutes into the movie, like not even that long, I'm just like, I'm already bored. This is
Hmm.
already so boring. I'm doing another flashback. It's another sad old English person who's sad that their life didn't go the way that they wanted it to go. And we're doing a flashback to when they were younger
Hmm.
and naive and making stupid decisions. And I don't care. I don't care. And it's not entertaining. And no one will ever convince me that it is. Even like I said, I give Howard's End a great score. And I think it's genuinely a great movie, especially for all the political themes that it's going for.
Hmm.
Especially when it goes into like class warfare and class division. That film is awesome, but it's boring. It's boring, and it's nothing's going to change that.
No, look, I'm not gonna try to change your mind because I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah,
These would definitely be my least favorite genre. I would still watch
yeah.
it because yeah, some of them are highly decorated, and just, appreciated. And then there's me sitting in a corner like, why?
One thing I
So,
can say, which is kind of nice, is these
mhm,
type of films have seemingly fallen out of favor for
yes.
whatever reason. People aren't making costume dramas as much anymore, or if
Hmm.
they are, they're not pronounced awards bait.
Hmm.
Like you could skip them and be okay because they're not really in the awards conversation outside of something like best costume, maybe.
Hmm.
Um,
Or
and
again,
and
or they modernized it like Little Women from like, from Greta Gerwig. That's a great
yeah,
example of kind of a costume drama that's been modernized to more
yeah,
to this audience, and it's actually a great movie.
yeah.
So
But there was an era
yeah.
from like the early to mid '80s all the way through to the mid '90s
Hmm.
where these were not just nominated for costumes, these were nominated for editing
Yes.
and for screenplay and for cinematography and
Hmm.
acting and director and sometimes even best picture. And some of these won. Some of
Yep.
these won.
Yep.
And it's insane to me.
Nice. Yeah, it is. It is. Well, speaking of movies, let's go to the Flix part of this podcast. So, Heath, what is your last new movie you rated 5 out of 5, which in this case would be anything 2020s?
Ooh, the last movie that
Hmm.
I rated 5 out of 5 since the year 2020
Hmm.
would actually be three films that I saw this year.
Okay,
Um, and I'm gonna just name all of them instead of just doing one because they all came out within
fair enough.
just a few months of each other. And that would be Oppenheimer, Barbie, and Killers of the Flower Moon.
Nice.
Um, I do not dish out 5 out of 5. I call them perfect scores or masterpiece scores often.
Hmm.
In fact, and I know I've seen more movies than this. I just can't remember all the ones I've seen, especially from my childhood.
Hmm.
So I'm sure the actual count is well over 3,000. But of the 2,906 films I've logged on Letterboxd, only 105 of them have had a perfect score, 5 out of 5.
Hmm.
So we're talking 3%.
Yeah.
It's not very much. It is something incredibly rare for me. So if I even get multiple 5 out of 5s in a single given year, that's kind of a big deal. So to get three from this year, I think is pretty incredible. But yeah, Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Killers of the Flower Moon, all of them I gave a perfect score to for very different reasons.
Hmm.
But I do think that they're all masterpieces. And what's interesting is that those aren't necessarily my top three films of the year. Now, Oppenheimer and Barbie are. They're my number one and number two. I
Hmm.
actually have Killers of the Flower Moon beneath that, because I rate films, or at least I attempt. I
Hmm.
always joke. I attempt to rate films as objectively as I can, but I let subjectivity seep in from time to time. But
Hmm.
I rank films entirely on subjectivity, although sometimes my head gets the better sense of me.
Yeah.
So I have Killers of the Flower Moon ranked number 8 of the year. Still high because that's out of 174.
Hmm.
But yeah, those are my three from this year that I've given a perfect 5 out of 5 masterpiece score to: Oppenheimer, Barbie, and Killers of the Flower Moon.
All great choices. All
Yep.
great choices. What would be the last teen movie you rated 5 out of 5? So for again, this podcast, it's anything between 2003 and 2019.
The most recent film from that time frame that I
Hmm.
gave a 5 out of 5 to would be Prisoners,
Oh.
Denis Villeneuve's movie.
Hmm.
I didn't see that when it came out. I actually only saw that for the first time. I think, oh, it might have been 2000, no, 2022, maybe. I don't think it was last year.
Hmm.
I think it was 2022. And now I'm doubting myself and questioning it. So I'm going to check. Oh, nope, it was 2021. So I'm due for a rewatch on that already. But yeah, Prisoners is just, that was a powerful film. I will admit, I don't know if it's biased because there's plenty of films in this genre that I don't rank 5 out of 5 masterpieces or that I don't enjoy.
Hmm.
But in terms of my proclivities and what is more engaging to me and more likely to be something that I enjoy, uh, murder mysteries or detective dramas, which kind of intertwine into one thing, but specifically the murder mystery is my favorite genre of film.
Okay.
I love them. I can watch murder mysteries all day and just be completely captivated. Like,
Hmm.
yes, give me these for forever. I love being an armchair detective. I want to put the clues together. I want to solve the riddles, catch the bad guy, all of that. And Prisoners does that in such a soul crushing way,
Hmm.
that it's impossible for me to turn away from. Villeneuve just comes at it with such power and conviction in how he wants to film this, how he wants to tell this story. The performances from Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal are just tremendous. It's haunting. It's so creepy. The score is unsettling. Just so much about this film really works. And I saw that and I was just like, oh yeah, this is an instant 5 out of 5. It wasn't even a doubt for me.
Hmm.
Uh, and especially by the time we got to the end of the movie, I was like, oh, perfect. This is great. So Prisoners was my last or most recent 5 out of 5 from that era. Now, I will say, again, looking up when I reviewed that last, which is when I last watched that, that was in 2021. So that's not to say that I haven't watched 5 out of 5 films from that era since then.
Hmm.
They were just rewatches, films that I had previously ranked 5 out of 5. I haven't ranked any new movies 5 out of 5 since then.
That's fair. See, since you like murder mystery so much, you probably must love the murder mystery movies with starring Adam Sandler.
No, I fucking hate those. Like I said, it's not a direct bias because there are some things I don't like, and those
Yep.
are some of them. I think those movies are garbage.
No, I understand. It was just a cheap joke. Like when you
Yep.
said I love murder mystery, like so much, I was like, oh, even the Adam Sandler ones. No,
Like Knives Out is a top five movie. I have that as my number five movie of all time.
Knives
Is
Out is
Knives Out.
awesome. No,
I have Zodiac, which I consider Zodiac a murder mystery. It's a detective
it
murder
is.
mystery. I have that as my number nine
Mm-hmm.
of film of all time. L.A. Confidential is my number 11. A Few Good Men, which again, it's a
Oh,
variation on a murder mystery. That's my
yes.
number 12. So, like, in my top 15, four of them are
Mm-hmm.
murder mysteries of some kind or another. So,
Oh,
it's kind
Few
of my
Good
jam.
Men. Few Good Men is an excellent movie. Well,
Mm. And
well,
there's
all of
even
them.
more in my list than that. I'm just stopping at 15.
Yeah. No, it's that. That's fair. That's fair. So, what would be the last old movie you rated 5 out of 5, which is anything, 1970? Oh, sorry,
Oh no, we
1975
got
to
to do the other
2002.
one. You skipped it.
Oh, adult. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, sorry. Morning for me. What's the last adult movie you rated 5 out of 5? 2002 to 1975.
Sure. That would be The Piano. Jane Campion's masterpiece from 1993, although I consider it 1994 because that's when it was actually in wide release in the
Yeah.
States. I usually, if you go to my Letterboxd and look at my yearly rankings, they are all based on when they were available for wide release in the States because that's the soonest I could have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this film is incredible. It is an absolute masterpiece. I think Jane Campion, I really loved The Power of the Dog, but this is her masterpiece. This is her magnum opus in my opinion. I think Holly Hunter is tremendous here. Harvey Keitel is tremendous here. I love the griminess of it. Like, this film feels so mucky and dirty, but
Mm-hmm.
like, it's so incredible that Campion can pull like romance and love out of that setting
Mm-hmm.
and just find beauty in the depression. I love the kind of brown, green, blue hues that like permeate this film throughout its cinematography. Uh, uh, just a beautiful looking film. I love the score. Just everything about this film is just so profoundly moving to me. Um, and it's just, oh, it's gorgeous. So yeah, The Piano is definitely one that fits the bill for me and hit 5 out of 5.
I definitely sign everything you said, except for The Power of the Dog, because that's the movie that somehow missed me. I need to rewatch it because everybody seems to be raving about it, and I'm like, really? Okay.
I Power of the Dog, I gave the first time I saw it, I think a 3.5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time I saw it, it was like a 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's grown on me every time I've seen it. It's just a better and better film. The more you unwrap it, just it's not like The Piano where it just hits me and it's just like, oh, this is a masterpiece. It
Mm-hmm.
was, oh, I liked it, I think it's good, but I don't know if I'm getting everything from it. And the more trips I've taken into The Power of the Dog, the more I've been like, oh yeah, no, this is damn good too.
No, I think I'm due for a rewatch because yeah, like I watched it once and just didn't hit me at all, and I was like, is that it? And then it won
it's
all the
it's much
awards.
better once you know the
Yeah.
thing with the lasso
Mm-hmm.
and what was going on the whole time, and so you can see those seeds throughout the film
Mm-hmm.
and what emotions were really behind what decisions and how characters truly felt about one another.
Yeah.
It makes it much more riveting. So it's one of those films where once you know the ending,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as blatant as in your face as something like Ocean's 11 of, oh, that's how they did the heist. Well, now let's
Yeah.
go back and watch it again, and haha, they were recording it the whole time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that blunt,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same kind of theory behind it of once you know the ending and what really happened, it hits harder.
All right, I'll take your word for it. So, and what's the last old movie you would rate 5 out of 5? This being anything, 74 and older.
Sure. So that would be The Hustler
Yes.
from 1961. I'm a sucker for Paul Newman.
Mm-hmm.
Rest in peace, legend. I miss you so much. You were genuinely one of the best.
Yes.
Jackie Gleason is also great here. George C. Scott, Piper Laurie, of course. The Hustler is a tremendous film. I also think it's a masterpiece. This one, much more so than the others that although it definitely have some character study elements to them, don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
Those are more plot based, you know,
Yeah.
Prisoners, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Killers, even the piano. Whereas The Hustler is the plot is inconsequential. It is not
Hmm.
about that whatsoever. This is about the bowels of humanity and the depravity of man and how far they can sink before they can recover and rediscover themselves, more so revitalize themselves. It's like in a weird way, it's like a phoenix from the ashes kind of story.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's tremendous. I love the black and white cinematography to it. I love the sense of desperation to it that, you know, Fast Eddie has as his career as a hustler is falling apart, but how he kind of rediscovers himself.
Hmm.
It's not a 5 out of 5 masterpiece for me, the sequel, The Color of Money, but that is a 4.5 out of 5. Vastly underrated and underseen Scorsese film
Yes.
that is really good. I really appreciate it, especially because it really subverts your expectation on the ending. Because the whole time you think, oh, Fast Eddie's training his protege, and he's just going to give it to Tom Cruise to kind of take the reins. And then by the end, he's like, no, fuck it. I've still got it. I'm still going to be the badass. So that's also great. I know that's not directly about the hustler, but it is
Hmm.
fun to watch these two movies in tandem. I'm still hoping someone someday will be like, okay, Tom, we need to make a third film, and you're gonna
He's
you're
gonna
gonna
be the
be
mentor this time.
the new old guy. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know how many people are interested in watching another film about 8 ball pool, but I would watch that in a heartbeat if they could bring Tom Cruise back to do that.
Me
But yeah,
too.
I love The Hustler. I think it's so compelling and
Hmm.
kinetic and
Hmm.
absolutely worth watching.
100%. And Paul Newman, he was a legend. As a straight man, I can, without a doubt say he was one of the most beautiful
Oh,
men I've
the
ever
man's
seen.
gorgeous. Yeah,
Like
just oh, it's incredible.
every time you see some of his pictures, like just yesterday, I seen a picture of him during the MLK's "I Have a Dream" speech because apparently he was there, and he just looks like like the coolest guy you've ever met. I'm like, God fucking damn.
Well, and he was one of those guys that aged like a fine wine. You can
Mm-hmm.
go see pictures of him and Cool Hand Luke from like 1967.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another claim to my dad's 1967
Yep.
thing. Um, or you can go see him in The Verdict, or even like The Sting, which was those are different decades, a decade apart, but or like more like Road to Perdition from
Yes.
2002, and he still looks great. He looks incredible. It's just or the Hudsucker Proxy. He looks great. So like it's just the guy's awesome.
Legend. Legend. Excuse me. So we touched upon this a bit with the years, but what would be your favorite movie decade?
All right, so I have two answers to this. First, I'll
Okay.
go objectively. Again, as objectively as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Art is a subjective medium, and movies are art. But as objective as I can, trying to keep my own personal biases and emotions out of it, I would say the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the disillusion of old Hollywood and the foundation of new Hollywood. The idea that filmmakers could truly spread their wings, tell stories that challenged people, not just people as in each other and themselves in Hollywood, but challenged audiences. They don't make films like that anymore, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could go to almost any Oscar lineup from the 70s and be like, yeah, this is probably a better lineup than any of the lineups we've had in years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's incredible. And so for that reason, I would say probably the 70s is what I would say is objectively the best. Just to give an example, by the way, from 1976, this was the lineup: Bound for Glory, Rocky, All the President's Men, Taxi Driver, and Network. That is
Yep.
insane. Four of those five, Rocky, Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, and Network, are generally universally considered like all time
Yep.
masterpiece classics. And Bound for Glory, although incredibly underseen by most people, is also a really great film.
Hmm.
And the idea of having um, a lineup of that caliber in this day and age is just like it's just not possible. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't happen. We might get like two or three films, maybe, and we nominate 10
Yeah.
that are just like, oh yeah, we'll talk about these for decades. And the 70s just kind of did that year after year.
Hmm.
So the 70s is what I would say is probably objectively what I consider the best. Subjectively,
Yeah.
very different. Fucking love the 90s, man. The 90s
Yes.
are so fun. The action movies are so like campy in the best way. They're over the top. They take the excess of the 80s, but they add a little bit more of the established grit and realism that we would get in the 2000s. The dramas, I'm not talking about the long historical epics. I'm not talking about the English Patient or even ones I enjoy like Braveheart.
Hmm.
I'm talking the creative dramas, things like the Truman Show that like really tried to be captivating and deliver something new. Uh, cerebral pieces like Being John Malkovich, things that, you had directors coming out of the woodwork for another new age of Hollywood. You get Fincher making things like Seven and Fight Club.
Hmm.
You get Scorsese, arguably, depending on who you talk to, at the height of his powers. With Goodfellas, Casino. He does Kundun here. He does Age of Innocence. Um, like you said earlier, 1994, tremendous year in film. You have really Quentin Tarantino solidifying himself after he had already done Reservoir Dogs. Now he's got Pulp Fiction.
Yep.
You've got Shawshank Redemption. Um, it's just there's so many great films
Hmm.
throughout this decade that are incredibly entertaining, that are incredibly funny, that are action packed, and things that really changed cinema as well, like Silence of the Lambs and how we view horror. And horror can
Hmm.
be more artistic and be taken more seriously as a medium. Or The Matrix coming along and completely shattering what we thought was possible with modern technology and how we could shoot action and how sci-fi can visually look as an aesthetic on the screen.
Hmm.
There's just so much that changed and evolved from the 90s. And again, I just find that decade fun. I have fun watching these movies.
Yes.
Not that it's perfect. There's a lot of shit movies too, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. There's plenty of movies from the 90s that I'm like, oh my god, I never want to see that again.
Hmm.
um, Also, as an aside, I'm a massive Jim Carrey fan. So that was the takeover of Jim Carrey in the
Hmm.
90s as well, especially in 1994, where within, I think it was like 6 or 8 months of each other in one year, you had The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and
Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the
Yeah.
original. And that's like an insane. There are comedian actors, comic actors in Hollywood that would kill for having those three movies at any point in their career, let
Hmm.
alone within 6 to 8 months of one year.
Yes.
And it just shot him to the stratosphere. And I've been a Jim Carrey fan ever since. So
Hmm.
yeah, the 90s is just so much fun.
No, it is. I've even said this on this podcast already. Many great filmmakers consider 70s, as you said, their favorite decade because of the like neorealism and like how Hollywood was influenced by the French New Wave and the
The French New
European
Wave. Yep.
cinema. So like it brought, they brought it, the filmmakers at the time, they brought it to Hollywood. So that's why many people love the like rawness of 70s movies. However, I made the argument before. I think in 10, 15 years time, when we get even newer or like younger directors in Hollywood, I feel like they will have the same opinions about the 90s and they would because they would be brought up in the 90s and they would reference mainly 90s movies because 90s was a great decade for movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you mentioned, there's many like, whether it's the action, Matrix or sci-fi revolution or comedy, like Kevin Smith forged his name in the 90s. And for a
Yep.
while, he was the, comedic guy to go to. If you see in a movie directed by Kevin Smith, you knew you were
And
in for
Clerks
a good
still
time.
holds up. It's still
Yeah.
great. There's
Yeah.
some jokes in there that don't, but
Hmm.
overall, that film is still great. And there's so many from that decade that you're just like, oh, these still hit so hard.
Yep. No, it's no, two great decades. Honestly, they're just perfect. So we've already heard some of your hot takes. So give me some more of your movie hot takes.
Yeah. So one more hot take. So I know I did my earlier hot take on film
Hmm.
as a genre, but now I will do a specific film,
Okay.
and that is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Again, this isn't so much a hot take. I feel like there will always be people that hate this movie, always
Hmm.
people that love this movie. But I feel like more and more as time gone has gone by, I feel like there's been not a full retrospective reanalysis of this film. But I feel like people are appreciating it more,
Hmm.
which is to say, get the fuck on my level. I have been here the whole time, and this is one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. It is the
Hmm.
third best Star Wars film ever, only behind Empire and the original.
Hmm.
And I it's to the point where I genuinely don't understand anyone that says otherwise. Like
Hmm.
that's my hot take is not that I think The Last Jedi is great, and I do. I have it as a 4.5 out of 5. I've had it as a 4.5 out of 5 since it released
Hmm.
that opening weekend. My hot take is I don't even know how I could comprehend that you could think otherwise. Like I just
Hmm.
it blows my mind to me. And again, I think uh it's been kind of reevaluated a little bit more favorably as time has gone on, especially because since then we've had The Rise of Skywalker, which was a fucking joke of a film.
Hmm.
And we saw how the sequel trilogy ended and how that ends the entire 9 episode Star Wars saga.
Hmm.
And we've seen how Disney has treated Star Wars as a property ever since in other films and in television, and how Disney is treating even other properties like Marvel. And we've seen Rian Johnson, who took 99% of the blunt and vitriol for the hate for The Last Jedi,
Hmm.
how he's gone on since then to give us two fucking great films, one of
Yes.
which I literally mentioned earlier as my fifth favorite film of all time in Knives Out, and then another great film in Glass Onion. Um, and I think people have kind of come around to, oh yeah, okay, maybe we were a little harsh, and Rian Johnson kind of knew what he was doing, and it's maybe Disney that doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, because my take, to be a little bit more precise, is I don't know why you could be mad at The Last Jedi when we never saw a sequel to The Last Jedi. We saw a sequel to The Force Awakens
Hmm.
that pretended that The Last Jedi didn't exist. So
Hmm.
all the themes and the threads that Rian Johnson seeded throughout that film were never capitalized on.
Yep.
It'd be like to me saying Empire Strikes Back fucking sucks if you never saw Return of the Jedi.
Hmm.
If you'd only seen A New Hope, the original Star Wars, and Empire.
Yeah.
And to be clear, and people forget this because the internet isn't as old as Star Wars, people thought that at the time.
Hmm.
Empire was not liked when it was initially received. Not like hated, not like The
Hmm.
Last Jedi, but there was plenty of people that are like, "What are you talking about? Vader's Luke's father." And
Yeah.
nowadays it's not even considered a twist anymore. It's just commonplace. It's part of the pop culture zeitgeist. But at the
Yes.
time, that blew people's minds,
Hmm.
and like people didn't like it. And they're like, well, this screws up the lore. You're
Hmm.
contradicting the previous film. All the same complaints and shit that people have about The Last Jedi, they had about Empire.
Hmm.
But then we got Return of the Jedi. We got to see the whole story come full circle.
Hmm.
We saw how Obi-Wan lied on purpose, showing that the Jedi themselves are fallible
Yeah.
and that there is no perfect system. All we can do is try to do our best.
Hmm.
And all these things that made the decisions in Empire so much more profound from a cinematic standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, that we are able to recontextualize it and be like, oh, Empire's fucking genius.
Hmm.
We never got that with The Last Jedi.
Nope.
Here's what should have happened. And I'm going to soapbox a little bit more here.
Okay.
Um, Ryan Johnson should have been allowed to make the third movie. And the
Yes.
main villain should have been Kylo Ren.
Hmm.
That's what should have happened. The biggest complaint, and people like to say otherwise now. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, I hate that the fuel thing. That's so stupid that they have to worry
Hmm.
about the fuel. No one cared about the fuel in all the
Hmm.
other movies, which isn't true. You can actually hear plenty of lines of dialogue in the other films, even the original trilogy, about how we need to stop and get fuel or we're low on fuel,
Hmm.
whatever. Um, but the main thing people hated is that it was turning Kylo Ren into a bad guy and that it made Snoke irrelevant and that Snoke was killed before we could get to understand him as a character and as an origin, and that it made oh gosh and
Ray.
Rey too powerful and
Hmm.
without any kind of formal training.
Hmm.
Those were the real complaints people had at the time, is
Hmm.
essentially that it shit on their fan theories, that especially when they said, oh, Rey comes from no one, it shit all over everyone's fan theories about,
Yep.
oh, maybe she's the goddaughter of Obi-Wan or something, like
Mm.
whatever. And how dare they kill off Snoke? He was set up to be this badass, like next version of the Empire, the Emperor. But the point was, he wasn't the next version of the Emperor.
Hmm.
Kylo was. We've already seen a story where the apprentice of the Emperor figure eventually turns and becomes good. We
Hmm.
saw that in Return of the Jedi in the original trilogy when Darth Vader, confronted by the potential murder and death of his son, finally flips back to the light side of the Force and ends the reign of the Empire, kills the Emperor, and returns to the light. We
Yes.
saw that. Why did you want to see it again? Don't you want to see something different? That was the number one complaint about The Force Awakens
Yep.
before we even got The Last Jedi was, oh, well, this is just New Hope again. Only
Hmm.
this time, instead of a Star Destroyer being a battle station, it's now a planet and it's just bigger. But it was the same story.
Yes.
So, like, what do you want? Don't you want something different that challenges you? And that's the part I'll never understand. That's why I literally can't comprehend it. Is if you wanted the same story, then just go watch the originals. And if that's what you actually wanted, then why the fuck did everyone complain at The Force Awakens? And if you didn't actually not like that The Force Awakens was the same thing, then why are you complaining that this is different? Like,
Hmm.
the direct hypocrisy and contradiction always blew my mind. I never understood it. And it would have been so much more fascinating if they just let Kylo be the bad guy. If you're like, okay, this is something different. Kylo can't be turned. He is genuinely bad, and he's even more powerful than Snoke. That's
Hmm.
way more interesting than who Snoke. I could give a shit who
Yeah.
Snoke is. You know who I care about? I care about Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, the son of Han and Leia.
Yeah.
That's who I care about. And seeing his complete turn to the dark and that he's unsalvageable as a human being,
Hmm.
that his soul is completely corrupt, and we have to do battle with him. That is way more interesting and something we've never gotten in any of the Star Wars movies. And even like Rey just being like uber powerful and whatever. Okay. So, like, you guys realize Luke was relatively uber powerful. Like, what was the training we got from Luke in the first film? He deflects a couple blaster shots from a floating orb in the Millennium Falcon while it's in hyperspeed going to try to save uh Alderaan.
All drown.
And then that doesn't happen. He gets caught in a trash compactor in the Death Star. And
Hmm.
before you know it, he's going down the trench of the Death Star and he can make a perfect shot with his photon torpedoes and blow up the Death Star without the guidance computer because he's using the Force.
Yeah.
Did you guys forget Luke was super powerful out of nowhere too? Because it was in his blood. That was the point. And it's in Rey's blood too. And she doesn't have to be a Skywalker. She doesn't have to be a Kenobi. She doesn't have to be a Palpatine. She doesn't have to be anyone. That was also the point, is that the Force was meant for everyone. And Ryan remembered that like there was a time where Jedi could come from anywhere. People could be attuned from the Force from anywhere. It didn't have to be a saga about the Skywalkers. And
Hmm.
that's actually what made it special, is that it's meant for everyone. It's supposed to be inclusive, and that hope and prosperity can come from anywhere so long as we adapt and we learn to trust and work with these people. It's a message about humanity. And again, that's another thing. It's like, why would you? Isn't that more interesting? We've had movies upon movies of the Skywalker family beating the shit out of each other. Don't you want something different?
Hmm.
Or even tied to that, people are like, "Oh, I hate that Luke tossed his lightsaber away. That's so disrespectful." Like, are you kidding me? Like, the guy has been a hermit for years. He tried to restart the Jedi Academy like it was supposed to be done,
Hmm.
just like Rey is showing is capable. And you're upset that he threw this lightsaber. He's not the same person anymore. Like,
Hmm.
he's he's been through enough that he's dramatically changed as to who he is as an individual. And let's be very clear, this isn't like Indiana Jones changing from the early films to being a really sad guy in Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
Well, Indiana Jones was usually always a lighthearted person. So his change was more dramatic, but at least I understood that because his son died.
Hmm.
Luke was never a happy person. Go back and watch those original films. He was a whiny little bitch. He was a shit. Like, he wasn't a nice guy. He was never smiling and happy. Like, other than a few scenes at the end of A New Hope when he's like, "Ha, you guys, we did it. Yay."
Yeah.
Like, Luke was never like an uplifting guy. He was
Hmm.
morbid and dour. Like, what are you guys talking about? And of course, if he thinks that he was about to murder his nephew because he had a weak moment because he's failing as a teacher and failing under the weight and the pressure of the Jedi Order, and then he still doesn't do it, and people are like, "Oh, Luke would never kill his nephew." You're right, he didn't. Exactly. So
Hmm.
he doesn't do it, but it doesn't change the fact that Ben thought he was going to do it, and so now all of that's collapsed. Ben killed all these other trainees at the academy. That weighs on Luke. Like, everything makes sense.
Hmm.
And it's and so, like, what's the worst that you could do? You could, okay, cool, the blue milk breast
Oh yeah.
theme, that scene is weird. Okay, cool. You can hang your hat on that. Or the casino, the Canto Bite casino run. That takes up too much time and it's boring and it doesn't lead to anything. Well, actually, that tied thematically into the idea that not everything succeeds, which is a reoccurring theme throughout The Last Jedi, that things fail all the time. And it's how we lift ourselves and stand back up from that failure and learn from it that
Hmm.
matters. It was that was the whole point of that sub storyline, was that they were supposed to fail.
Hmm.
Uh, Again, okay, cool. You didn't like the casino scene. I just, the movie does so many things right
Yeah.
that I'm never gonna fault it when it's thematically engaging, it's new, it's creative, it's fresh, it's visually stunning. Like, the performances are excellent. I'll never understand why people don't like The Last Jedi. That movie should have been revered. And shame on Disney
Hmm.
for tucking their tail and running at a whole bunch of internet nerds being upset that they
Yes.
didn't like their movie. They should have had the balls, the gumption to stick with it and show people this is why we made these decisions. This is why Ryan wrote this script, because he wanted to take it to this movie and given us a third film that could have blown people's minds. And that would have made so many of the decisions in The Last Jedi worth it. But we never got that movie. And I will forever hate Disney for that.
Yep.
If someday they were like, "Ryan, come write your version of episode 9 and we will make another episode 9 and release it in theaters, and fans can just choose what timeline they like more," I'd be fucking down for that. Like, yes, I'll go see Ryan's episode 9. Please let that happen.
Hmm.
And I will pretend that The Rise of Skywalker doesn't exist.
Release the Johnson cut. No, like as video previous hot take, it's not a hot take on this podcast because I'm 100% with you. I'm 100% with you. Even though I wasn't one of those people, but I was just taken aback when I saw The Last Jedi for the first time midnight screening because that's how I roll with Star Wars, or I used to at least. And
When
I
midnight
was not,
screenings were a thing
yes.
before 7 p.m. on a Thursday. Yeah.
And it's like it took me back because I wasn't expecting it, as you said. Like, I think that's what why many people didn't like it at all because they've planned everything. There are numerous like theories, and obviously we live in an age of internet. There are numerous of leaks and spoilers, and some of them were false. Some of them were straight up bullshit people made up, but people
Yep.
believed this is what's gonna happen. So people went to see this movie. They already had planned in their head and and pre-visioned, and suddenly Ryan Johnson says, "No, I'll do it my own way. Thank you very much." And people were like, well, that's not my Star Wars. That's not what I envisioned in the last 2 years. Since
Yeah.
that was the gap between Force Awakens and Last Jedi. So, and I think exactly as you said, I've rewatched it with my girlfriend when I introduced her to Star Wars a couple of years ago, and I was already high on Last Jedi, but yeah, it just cemented the feel of this is a masterpiece, and I wish Ryan Johnson could have finished the trilogy because what we've gotten, it's not even what we've gotten after is just bullshit. It's more about everything he says in that movie gets undone by the Rise of
Yeah.
Skywalker. So Rey's
Everything.
suddenly
Everything that The
Palpatine.
Last Jedi achieved, which was so many good things,
Yep.
completely undone.
Because again, I couldn't care less about all this discussion. Oh, is she Skywalker? Is she Obi-Wan's daughter or granddaughter or whoever? I was like, does it matter? Like,
It doesn't
cannot
matter.
she just be a random person who's got a force? That's like,
And
can
I thought
we?
that was again, so much more interesting.
Yes.
Why, this random person that was abandoned by her parents is
Mm-hmm.
force attuned, force sensitive. Why? How? And what does that mean? What are the implications? Even
Yes.
the very final shot of The Last Jedi, the broom
100%.
boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, oh my God, we are seeing that people have the force again. Like that there's hope and salvation in this galaxy, and just like none of it fucking mattered. Ugh.
Yep. No, so again, like great, great monologue there. Like honestly, like I've enjoyed it, and and I just 100% agree. Like I wish I could, I wish I could challenge you a bit, but I cannot because everything you said is correct.
Yeah.
As the meme
And
says,
I know I
everything.
went really long there, but I'm very passionate about it.
No.
My review of The Last Jedi on Letterboxd is just as intense. And I just, because again, it's not that, and again, art is
Hmm.
subjective. I respect
Yes.
it. If you don't like it, then you don't like it. But I'll never understand any reason you give me for why you don't like it. I'll never understand it. I
Yeah.
just have to accept, okay, you don't like the movie. And I
Hmm.
just kind of blankly leave it at that, because
Hmm.
any amount of logic or reasoning that anyone has ever given me, I'm like, no, then you just weren't paying attention to the themes of the film,
Yeah.
or what the director was trying to say. Like, it just,
Hmm.
you're intentionally choosing to not accept things because you just don't want to. And I'm like, that's not how movies work. If
Yeah.
this wasn't Star Wars and it didn't have a franchise and there weren't all these other films and you hadn't seen them all a million times and had decades of investment into them,
Hmm.
you wouldn't have given a shit. You would have accepted all of this and not cared. But because it's Star Wars, you're pissed off because you didn't get what you want. You didn't get your shiny toy under the tree at Christmas, and damn you for ruining what could have been a masterpiece.
Yeah. And again, this would have been regarded as one of the best sci-fi movies if it wasn't for
Yeah.
the Star Wars label. Like as you say, exactly. Like, some of the shots, like it's beautifully shot, the choreography, the sequence where they fight in the like in that like red room, it's
Oh,
beautiful. Just
gorgeous.
yeah, so
Literally the
yeah.
only scene I do not like of the movie, and the only
Hmm.
reason I don't give it a perfect score, and this is because I do think this scene is genuinely cheesy. I'll clarify, it's cheesy because of how it visually looks. I actually have no problem with this force power, but the fact that Leia Mary Poppins her way back to the ship,
Yeah.
I actually don't mind that she's able to use the force to kind of build like a force cocoon around herself so that she can survive in space. It just visually looks really stupid.
Hmm.
I think they could have filmed it and shot it better. It looks dumb. It does break me out of the movie a little bit, and I do laugh at that. That is why it's not a 5 out of 5 masterpiece for me.
Hmm.
And anyone who wants to make fun of the Mary Poppins scene, I get it. But anything else, I'm going to take you to task on.
No, same with me. Same with me. So let's go into the underrated category and let's hype up some actors, actresses, and movies. So, Heath, who would you say is the most underrated actor we currently have?
So it's really weird.
Hmm.
My answers are not going to be conventional. These are not going to be
Great.
small names. These are big names. but usually, especially in film circles, people define underrated by their accolades.
Hmm.
And that's not fair. I want to stress this. It is not fair.
Hmm.
But my actor that I'm going to say here is an is is a respected actor,
Hmm.
but has never won the big awards. And because of that, people still look at him as, oh, he's just the guy that does this. And that is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is probably the biggest box office, not even probably, definitively the biggest box office draw, I think, in the history of film.
Yeah.
I think collectively he has brought in more box office money than any other single actor.
Hmm.
I don't even know if it's close, if I'm even being uh so that I'm not being coy about it. But because he's never won an Oscar, even though
Hmm.
he's been nominated several times,
Hmm.
because he's never won, and especially because of that Scientology jumping on the couch on Oprah
Yep.
almost 15 years ago or 2 decades ago now,
Hmm.
people still see him kind of as a joke. I remember even so much so that in 2022, when Top Gun Maverick came out, there were people that are like, oh, I guess Tom Cruise is back.
Hmm.
Back, motherfucker. He didn't go anywhere. Like, yeah, is the dude weird? Yes, the dude
Yes.
is weird. Do I think Scientology is a good thing? No, I don't.
Hmm.
Not in the slightest. But Tom Cruise has genuinely been one of the greatest actors that we've had for decades. And the fact that he wanted to just kind of change his career and stop doing serious dramas at the late 80s, early 90s, and decided to transition to kind of just do, since the mid 90s, all action movies,
Hmm.
that was his choice. He just wanted to. But that doesn't change the fact that he's not still one of the most talented people. The stuff he's doing on screen in Top Gun Maverick or Mission Impossible Fallout is still more compelling than most dramatic actors can even do. And he's even doing it while doing his own stunts.
Yeah.
The guy is incredible. Frankly, I hope that he does do another dramatic film at some point because I want him to be recognized. I frankly think he deserves an Oscar. I think he should have won one by now. I
Hmm.
think Born on the 4th of July probably could have gotten him an Oscar.
Yeah.
You could make an argument that he could have gotten a supporting Oscar for something like The Color of Money. He probably could have gotten an Oscar for Eyes Wide Shut. For Magnolia, he was nominated. He was
Hmm.
fucking phenomenal.
Hmm.
There's so many that he's done, like Rain Man, where you're just like, he is one of the greatest talents we've ever had. He is definitively the biggest box office draw we've ever had. But when people list the best actors of all time, he's nowhere even fucking close to the conversation.
Hmm.
No one mentions him. Why? Because we care about awards. You'll hear
Yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis, you'll hear Robert De Niro, you'll hear Leonardo DiCaprio. Maybe 20 names down, like
Hmm.
20 to 30, you might hear someone say Tom Cruise. And that's a fucking shame. The guy is a multiple time Oscar nominee and the biggest box office draw of all time. And just because he likes to do action films doesn't change the fact that he's one of the best. So that's why I say, even though he's a huge fucking name, I actually think Tom Cruise is underrated.
All right. I like that, to be honest. Yeah, because he definitely doesn't get the it's weird to say Tom Cruise doesn't get the credit he deserves because it's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But no, I do like I really like that.
Because again, I'm going strictly off the phrasing. Who do you think is an underrated actor?
Hmm. Hmm.
And by that definition, because again, we consider people underrated by their achievements, by their accolades. Again, not necessarily even saying that that's fair.
Hmm.
I don't even think that it is.
Hmm.
But that's how society at large judges these things when we have these conversations about best actors or
Yes.
actresses.
Yes.
And Tom's just gotten shit on for no reason because he jumped on a couch on Oprah's show and he was a weird dude.
Hmm.
And ever since then, he doesn't do dramatic shit. And yeah, it's just a shame.
Yeah. Well, speaking of actresses, who would you say
Mm.
is the most underrated actress we have right now?
This was a little tougher for me
Hmm.
because I think as much as actresses don't get nearly the representation that actors do in terms of box office, in terms of fuck, even just who gets bigger pictures on a poster for
Yeah.
a film, like, you know, how much money they make for doing a film. I feel like the Oscars and award shows in general have been much more gracious about awarding a lot of different people
Hmm.
and nominating a lot of different people
Hmm.
than actors. Actors seems very samey year after year. And I'm not saying that's a hard and fast rule. Every once in a while we'll get surprises in there, and that's great. But for the most part, you see a lot of the same names, whereas actresses, you usually see a lot of different names. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big thing that makes the actress races more interesting. So this was harder for me.
Okay.
I'm picking Ana de Armas
Mm.
because I think although she did just recently get her first Oscar nomination with Blonde,
Hmm.
a lot of people did not fucking like that movie, myself included. I had to write the review for that for Sif Pop, and I
Nice.
was really uncomfortable as to how to even put into words why that movie didn't work.
Hmm.
Um, but I think Ana de Armas is underrated because I get the sense, the epiphany that she's going down a Tom
Hmm.
Cruise-ish route, where
Hmm.
she'll kind of just do what she wants and she's going to have fun. Like right now, this year, she's coming out with Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff.
Yeah.
And she's done genre films. Like she was in the last James Bond movie for a small supporting role. And she was a
Hmm.
giant naked robot hologram in Blade Runner 2049. And
Hmm.
she was in Knives Out. And I say all this to say that while these are not really the kind of roles that will award you nominations and accolades for your film performances, these are the kind of roles that will get a lot of people to recognize you and notice you.
Hmm.
And it just shows to me that she's willing to kind of do anything. But at the same time, because she's willing to kind of do anything, I am incapable of pigeonholing her at this point. I don't know what her skill sets and talents are. More importantly, I don't know where they extend and where they end. And I
Hmm.
think that's the most fascinating thing is because after her first couple roles, I would have never thought she could do a James Bond film,
Hmm.
but she did the damn thing and she was one of the best. That scene was one of the best scenes of that movie. And I fucking
Yes.
loved that movie. You know, I thought she was great in Knives Out. I thought she was great in Blonde, and I hated Blonde.
Hmm.
But even in my review, I was like, it's hard for me to completely shit on this movie because Ana de Armas is tremendous in this film. And like, I'm excited to see her in Ballerina. Do I think
Hmm.
it's going to be a good movie? I'm admittedly actually a little scared of it,
Hmm.
but the thing that makes me the most excited is her because she's proven time and time again already in a relatively short time span that she has the talent to do special things.
No,
Uh,
100%. Like
so I'm. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I agree with you, and I would also argue, and bear with me here, if there is a like I call this the Marilyn Monroe effect. If when an actress, a specific actress, is so gorgeous, like objectively beautiful, that they are not many times taken seriously, or they get pigeonholed into the oh she's this sexy person, or she's this sexy
Yeah,
person in that movie, like Scarlett Johansson. She's got the acting chops. She's been nominated several times, but. And if you watch like something like Lost in Translation, she's not like, she doesn't, she's still like Scarlett Johansson, so obviously she's still gorgeous. However, that movie uses her, for lack of better word, as almost the girl next door. She's not the sex bomb. She is just ScarJo. Whereas if you watch her in Matchpoint and in many movies after that, before she entered her Marvel era, she's always she's the hot blonde girl from this one, or she's the hot blonde girl there, which is great. But I feel like, and with Ana de Armas, I feel like she might have stumbled upon the same thing where she has the acting talent, but she's so distractingly gorgeous. Many directors don't know what else to do with her
I don't.
but
I don't
that.
think people know how to use her well yet,
Yeah.
and and also her agent needs to get better at picking films because
Yes.
things like Ghosted or Deep Water or Knock Knock,
Mm.
you know, I still see talent in her, but I'm also just like, you're putting her in here because she's hot
Yes.
or because you want us to see her boobs. And it feels kind of icky and
Hmm.
gross. And I'm just like, she's too good to be doing these things. And I want people to start giving her more dramatic opportunities. I'm really hoping that Blonde opens that door because I think she has a lot of capabilities. But even still, even if she doesn't get the dramatic opportunities that could turn into awards someday,
Hmm.
I genuinely could see her going down a Tom Cruise's route where she just kind of does sci-fi, action, genre, maybe
Hmm.
horror, fantasy films for like a decade plus, and she crushes all of them.
Hmm.
And then we'll be saying in a decade, like, oh yeah, it's 2035. Remember when Ana de Armas started acting 2 decades ago?
Yep.
She's quietly been one of the best, most consistent actors we've had,
Hmm.
and no one talks about her as one of the best, just like Tom Cruise, where no one talks that they're one of the best, even though they're absolutely one of the best.
And a bit of piece of trivia you probably know because we know stuff like that. Knock Knock was her first English feature to the point where she literally didn't really speak much English, so I think she learned most of her lines phonetically.
Yep.
So she literally learned English in like 3 months, which
Yeah.
is,
And essentially just by repeating what people told her to say. Yeah.
yeah, which is
And
insane.
again, she was hired because she was hot.
Hmm. That's, yeah, let's leave it at that. So, who would you say is the most underrated director we have right now?
Again, another one where this is hard.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really talented people out there, a lot of options,
Hmm.
but I'm consistent, if anything. And I am going with the director who I think has one of the greatest runs in the history of film
Hmm.
of bangers after bangers after bangers. And we don't even talk about him. Again, like Tom Cruise, you could go 20 to 30 directors before you sometimes get to this guy's name
Hmm.
because not only has he never won, I don't even think he's been nominated for an Oscar.
Hmm.
I'd have to double check it.
Okay.
This is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The
Uh,
Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, The
mhm,
American President. That right there, that decade is a
mhm.
run that most directors would dream of,
Yep.
and that is Rob Reiner.
Yes.
I I think it's incredible. What really sucks is since then his movies have bombed, and it's kind of a combination of, well, his movies have bombed, but he's also not really been given the best scripts.
Hmm.
Like he's doing stuff like Rumor Has It and The Bucket List of all things.
Hmm.
Um, this year he did the Albert Brooks documentary, Defending My Life, and that's gotten decent reviews. But like clearly his prime was in the 80s and early 90s. And I, I I genuinely think that's one of the most legendary runs of film ever. But because we don't respect some of those kind of films as award caliber films, we literally don't even think about them in that regard. Like Misery is genuinely one of the best horror movies of all time, in my opinion.
Yes.
But because horror as a genre is not respected when it comes to the awards, I mean, just look at Toni Collette and Hereditary.
Hmm.
That's about as obvious as it could of a nomination, deserved nomination as it could possibly fucking get.
Or
And
Lupita Nyong'o for us.
yeah, and those things don't happen. So of course, Misery. Now, Kathy Bates still got the nomination. She actually won, I believe,
Yes.
for Misery. But like on the whole, like Rob Reiner didn't get a nomination for that.
Hmm.
Um, Princess Bride is considered unequivocally one of the greatest fantasy movies of all time,
Hmm.
even before the Lord of the Rings made fantasy mainstream. And even still, people to this day will go back and watch The Princess Bride over and over.
Hmm.
That sure as shit didn't get any record. When Harry Met Sally is considered arguably one of the greatest romantic comedies ever made,
Yep.
it doesn't get that right. This is Spinal Tap is considered one of the best mockumentaries ever made and best band films ever made. Stand By Me is a coming of age classic.
It is.
And the most egregious one, I think, is A Few Good Men. This was
Oh.
nominated for Best Picture. He did not get a director nomination. He's
Hmm.
never been nominated at the Oscars. And I just think it's it's a tragedy. And again, what's really bad is because since these films, his films have been, and I'll admit, not great. Like his run since then, not something you want to really talk about. So I get that
Hmm.
he clearly has those marks against him. I'm not detracting from that, but that run from the mid 80s to the mid 2000s or mid 2000s, mid 90s
Hmm.
is epic. That is one of the best directorial runs you will ever see. And he doesn't get nearly the credit, recognition, accolades, the mention that he should. Because again, like I said earlier, if you just take someone and start naming the best directors of all time, you're not going to get to Rob Reiner for a while. And
Yeah.
that's a shame because those are literally some genre defining films. Like When Harry Met Sally is a rom-com defining film.
Hmm.
Princess Bride is a fantasy defining film. A
Hmm.
Few Good Men is a legal courtroom thriller defining film.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a shame.
No, I signed, sealed, delivered. I cannot, add anything new what you haven't said already. So yeah, 100% agree with everything you said. That said, let's talk about some movies. What's the
Mm-hmm.
most underrated movie you think? And I know this is a tough one.
You know what? I'm sorry.
This is a tough one because there are so many like underrated movies. But which
Yeah.
one for you would be worth mentioning?
So this one for me, I there's so many ways to categorize an underrated individual movie. I went to Letterboxd for this one, and I literally just went to my stats and I looked at the biggest disparagement in my rating versus the average,
Oh yeah.
and that's kind of how I picked.
Hmm.
And when I saw what my biggest disparagement was, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that actually totally works for this." So I'll just do that. And that's from 1996, That Thing You Do, directed by Tom Hanks.
Mm.
Um, I have this as a 5 out of 5 masterpiece. I think this is a perfect film. I want to have the caveat here,
Hmm.
asterisk, note on the side,
Okay.
that I am talking about the extended edition, the director's cut, which is almost 45 minutes of additional footage and story and character development. It is significantly longer, however, significantly better than the theatrical version of the film.
Hmm.
And I'll give one example of it. I don't know. Have you ever seen it
Not
first?
yet,
Okay,
unfortunately.
and that's totally fine. So, it's about a band in the 60s that becomes really popular. They're a one-hit wonder, and they go from being a small local band outside of Erie, Pennsylvania, to a national sensation with a #1 chart topper.
Okay.
It's kind of what if America had an answer to the Beatles, is
Hmm.
kind of the conceit or concept of the film, especially because that was around that time. And it's got a bite, a campiness to it, a sense of humor to it that's so endearing. Um, the bass player in the theatrical version of the film starts creeping on and hitting on a singer from another band, from
Hmm.
another like all girl group, like a Motown uh 50s, 60s girl group. And it gets really fucking creepy.
Hmm.
And this is like a side storyline. It's not even the main thing. But in the extended edition, it is like a beautiful, loving, romantic relationship where she likes him back and they've been kind of like going on dates together at carnivals and going on rides together and like slowly falling in love and going out to dinner. And then they end up together and it's really quaint and cute.
Okay.
Completely different vibes because we had the extra time to develop the story.
Hmm.
So if you ever do see That Thing You Do, please, please, please seek out the extended edition.
I
But I
will.
have this as a 5 out of 5 masterpiece on Letterboxd. It says sits at a 3.6 out of 5. I think this film is perfect. It's still even the theatrical cut is good, and I think
Hmm.
the scores on Letterboxd show that. But I genuinely think this is one of the most creative musical films ever made. It's my favorite film about a fictional band, and it's
Hmm.
not even close. So that's comparing it to things like This Is Spinal Tap. That's comparing it to things like Almost Famous.
Hmm.
Uh, this film is just so adorable, entertaining. It's so funny, but it also has like a dramatic heart to it and heft to it that comes together in the end that I thoroughly enjoy.
Hmm.
I think That Thing You Do is incredibly underrated. Also, that soundtrack and all the music that they made for this fictional band also incredibly underrated. And it is a sin, a fucking sin, that the titular song, That Thing You Do, which is the name of the song that the movie is named after,
Hmm.
the song itself did not win Best Original Song at the Oscars. And I'm still bitter about it to this day. It lost to You Must Love Me from Evita. And I will tell you right now, You Must Love Me from Evita is nowhere fucking even close to as good as, or is even in the same league as That Thing You Do. Um, so yeah,
Both
That Thing
are
You
on
Do.
my watch list. So both Evita and this is on my watch list, but I'll now seek the extended edition of that thing you do. I'm
Yep.
very glad I know about it now. So yeah, and that's definitely, bumped it up much higher on that, ever-growing watch list.
Yep.
And lastly, what do you think is the most underrated TV show?
Okay, I'm gonna cheat here. I'm
Okay.
fully admitting up front this is a cheat, but it's my interview, so I'm cheating.
Hmm.
um, this is a mini series. It's a documentary mini series.
Okay.
It's called Baseball, a film by Ken Burns.
Ah, okay.
Um, so baseball is what it's just more colloquially known as. No one says the whole title.
Hmm.
Um, this is going to be special to anyone who just loves baseball. If you do
Hmm.
not love baseball, I don't think this is going to be for you. If you're mildly interested in baseball, though, or if you love baseball, this is like must watch, some of the best documentarian work literally ever put to film.
Hmm.
Each episode is 2 hours long, a full feature length film, and each episode covers roughly a decade of the sport.
Hmm.
The first episode is the invention of baseball all the way up to like 1910. And then every episode from there is a decade, like the 1910s, the 1920s, the 30s, 40s, so on and so forth. He made 9 episodes.
Hmm.
So each episode, of course, as in baseball, was called an inning. So this is the first inning, the second inning. Very, very cute little
Hmm.
mnemonic device that he did there. But what's really cool is that the film originally came out in the early 90s, I think like 93 or 94, something like that.
Hmm.
And that's all that the film covered. However, he has since come out with a 10th inning, a 10th episode that covers like when his show ended from like 94, 93 or something like that, up to I think 2011.
Okay.
Um, so he's even gone further, and a lot of people are hoping that someday he'll do another one,
Hmm.
that he'll do like 2011 to 2025 or who knows. But it is so fascinating, and what makes it so fascinating is that even if you're not a baseball person, like I said, someone that's just interested in baseball, the way that Ken ties it into America
Hmm.
as a concept, as a nation, its citizenry, its culture, its societal norms, all of it can relate back to baseball and how baseball has been a mirrored reflection of America's ideals. And so, in a weird way, the documentary is as much about the history of America from like 1870s to today,
Hmm.
but just through the lens of America's pastime, of America's favorite sport, which unfortunately it's not its favorite sport. I would say in the last couple decades, football has overtaken it, NFL football.
Hmm.
But it is it is just so riveting. It has some of the most genuine interviews I've ever heard from anyone. It's moving. It makes me cry. It's poignant. It's beautiful. Baseball, a film by Ken Burns, is my favorite miniseries television document
Yeah.
TV show.
As a person who doesn't really care about baseball, look, I've considered watching this because I've heard quite a few people talking about that aspect, how it's not about baseball, how everything is related to history of mainly
Yes.
America. So I think maybe even if I'm not into baseball, I would still appreciate it just for that aspect.
And I'll say this: I've watched an episode or two here or there with people who are not big baseball people,
Hmm.
and they are like, okay, that was fucking interesting. And I don't
Hmm.
even like baseball. Like now, again, it's all through the lens of baseball.
Hmm.
So there's still going to be plenty of conversation about baseball,
Yeah.
but the stories are so interesting, and the way that this film is structured is so compelling, and the way that it does tie back to America and its history. It's so much it's so much more than just, oh, this is a documentary about baseball.
Yeah.
Saying it's a documentary about baseball is a complete disservice to what this film is.
Okay. Okay. I might actually watch it then. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Now, again, you're in for hours and hours
Yes.
of television if you
Yeah.
want to do that. I, I'm gonna look it up while we're talking here, but I'm pretty sure it's incredibly long.
Hmm. And I would imagine if each episode is like 2 hours, that's at least like 18 hours or so of like a show. So yeah, that's a decent amount.
So baseball on Letterbox is listed as 1,351 minutes long,
Jesus.
but it's sitting at a 4.4 out of
Hmm.
5 rating, and I have it as a 5 out of 5 masterpiece.
Of course. Of course. No, that's all right. Like if I know, if I'm ever caught up on my like TV watch list, and that's gonna be streaming someplace, I'll remember you and I'll, pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But you've been talking for a while, so let's flip the tables. Do you have any question for me?
Yeah, so I thought we could have a conversation
Hmm.
about something that I think is imperative to the modern cinematic theatrical landscape, and that is the comic book industry and the
Of course.
comic book films.
Hmm.
Because this is my sneaky other hot take. I'm sneaking this in as a third hot take. So
Okay.
before I give my opinion, my question to you
Hmm.
is comic book fatigue real, or is it just a headline?
Oh, right. Yeah. So not to sound like the like some sort of enlightened centrist, but I think it's half and half. There's definitely a fatigue where we've seen nothing but comic books, or it seems like we've seen nothing but comic books for the last like almost 15, no, 15 years now, more than 15 years actually. But I don't think that's it. I think now, since the many people view, and let's face it, DC should be counted, but really the quality of their movie, let's skip past it for a second. MCU. And MCU peaked with Endgame. I think many people ever since then just, there's no overline like plot line, or it doesn't seem to be one. And this stage we are currently at, I still like the experimental kind of stage where we deal with grief, but much more, and the blip and stuff like that. However, I do understand why people are not as high on it, and I understand why people are not as high on experimenting with, oh, we'll see, will this stick or not? Because yeah, then we get some questionable movies or shows. But here's the thing. I like it. Not that I would rate everything 5 out of 5 that came out of, after the end game. No, I do, however, think if MCU will, is to survive, they need to be able to experiment. And we need to actually get on board with not everything they make will be the 5 out of 5 movie of the season. And so I think the fatigue, I think it's probably like, like for some people, 100%. For me, it's more about the quality. And then there are more of a misses than hits. So I think if MCU or and DC now under James Gunn were to, next year, were to come out with 2 or 3 excellent movies, you would quickly see that this discussion just dissipate and like disappear because then everybody would be back on board. And I think this is what many people, hardcore fans, much more hardcore than I am, scream about. We just want some consistency back. And so to that degree, I would say yes, but to some degree, I would say no. What do you think?
I don't think it's fucking real at all.
Okay.
and
Let's hear
that
it.
is my hidden third hot take. I think it is all headline mumbo jumbo, and I think people have been convinced, they've been talked into the idea that it's real, and they've
Hmm.
even convinced themselves, like, oh yeah, I guess I am feeling fatigued.
Hmm.
No, you're not. You just don't like bad movies,
Yeah.
and that's fine. You
Hmm.
shouldn't like bad movies. Guess what? I don't like bad movies either. You know what I do like? I like good movies. And
Yeah.
guess what? You probably like good movies too. And here's the thing. Here's how I know it's not real at all. Comic book movies, in some way, shape, or form, have been around for decades.
Hmm.
Decades. I'm talking the most prolific example of the dawn of the comic book movies from 1978, Superman the movie.
Yeah.
DC Comics existed and made four fucking Superman movies
Hmm.
before they even made a single Batman movie. Then
Hmm.
they went on and made four fucking Batman movies
Yeah.
before they went back and they're like, hey, let's do a Superman movie. But when they went back to do the Superman movie, they also rebooted Batman.
Hmm.
And we got another Superman. And then we got like three more Batman. And all of that happened just as the MCU started to exist.
Yeah.
So this isn't some new thing.
Hmm.
Now, are there more things now than there used to be? Yes, of course. I'm not dumb.
Hmm.
Are they coming out more frequently? Absolutely. But no one had a fucking problem with it when they were good. And that's the
Exactly.
part that I want to stress because that's so important. And the main thing people are tired of is, like you said, is the MCU. But again, let's just go back in time a little bit. The MCU phase three: Captain America Civil War,
Hmm.
Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and Spider Man Far From Home.
Hmm.
That was the MCU Phase 3. That went from May 6th of 2016 in the US to July 2nd of 2019. Roughly 3 years. They
Hmm.
made that many movies. And those are still considered some of the best movies in the MCU,
Yeah.
and not by a little bit either. That's
Hmm.
like considered the prime of the MCU by most
Yeah.
fans, whether they're the hardcore fans or the casual fans.
Hmm.
You know what the difference is now? The movies just suck now. They're
Hmm.
bad. Phase 4 was already a letdown, and phase 5 has gotten even worse. And yeah, you have more shit, and people are annoyed that they feel obligated that there's more shit to watch on Disney Plus, and
Hmm.
stuff on Disney Plus isn't good. Like Echo's just meh. Secret Invasion was bad. Like
Hmm.
the problem isn't that there's too much. Now, I would say that they still should tamper it back. I think the sweet spot is doing 2 to 3 movies a year, certainly
Hmm.
not like 3 to 4, sometimes pushing 5, depending on where the calendar lines up. And I certainly don't think we need 3 television shows on Disney Plus every year. I
Hmm.
think that's a mistake. And I don't think they all need to be tied in together, where it makes it feel like homework having to watch these things because I can't watch X before I watch Y or vice versa because
Hmm.
there's going to be some spoiler and it's going to ruin something.
Hmm.
I get that. That's frustrating, but that's asking too much of an audience. And that has nothing to do with comic book fatigue. That's other genres of film have done that too.
Hmm.
Other television shows have done that when there's been a spinoff of a spinoff of a spinoff. And you're like, oh, you got to go watch this show before you watch this one.
Yep.
That's been around for forever. The problem is the quality.
Yep.
And my other example as to how I know that's the case is because you know what came out this year and made a shit ton of money? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And you
Hmm.
know what came out the other year and made a shit ton of money? Spider-Man No Way Home.
Hmm.
And or yeah, No Way Home.
Yeah.
And you know what came out this year and also made a shit ton of money? Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Though not a part of the MCU, still very, very much a comic book movie. I
Hmm.
would even make an argument that it's more of a comic book movie than those other movies.
Yes.
And people loved them.
Hmm.
There are people that genuinely have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse rated as the best film of the year
Like
over
me.
things like Oppenheimer
I know.
and Barbie and Killers of the Flower Moon and so many great films like The Iron Claw or and I'm just like then the problem isn't comic book movies. That's
Hmm.
not the problem. The
Hmm.
problem is quality.
Yeah.
And the moment the quality, and I'm not saying that we're going to get back to phase three and that every single film is going to like blow people's minds and we're going to be having the best of times. And they're all at bare minimum, like 3 out of 5, if not 3.5, 4.5, or 5 out of 5s for people.
Hmm.
But you need to get back to that because, like, I'm at the point where I'm rating MCU and DC films like twos, two and a
Hmm.
half, 1.5 out of 5.
Hmm.
But the thing is, we all still like these characters. Even the
Yep.
DCEU, I like Aquaman. I like The Flash. I like Blue Beetle. Fuck, I love Green Lantern. He's my favorite comic book character of all time. And he's not even in the DCEU because they fucked him up so bad with Ryan Reynolds that they
Hmm.
didn't even bring him back for the DCEU. And now I'm going to have to wait till the next DC James Gunn universe to see if they finally bring my hero back.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's quality. Like the quality needs to be there. And if the quality is there, people will come. People will go to the theater and they will support it and they will make a lot of money and the studio executives will be happy and everything will be fine. But
Hmm.
if you keep churning out shit and especially shit that make you're making us watch other shit to just understand what's going on in this shit,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not going to be entertained. I'm not going to be happy about it. And that will generate a sense, a feeling, but it's a superfluous fictional feeling of fatigue. But in reality, you want better quality shit. And you should. We should
Hmm.
demand it by voicing it with our wallets. So I'm glad that the Marvels bombed. And I'm glad that these movies are doing bad. And I'm glad that the DCEU is ending. But it's not because I'm tired of them. It's because I
Hmm.
want them to be better. And I
Yes.
hope that they do get better.
So just to quote your other favorite movie, you're saying if they, if you build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Field of Dreams isn't my favorite movie, but yes, I do fucking love the Field of Dreams. Yes. But yeah, if you make good quality stuff, people will come. Like they're going to. It's people are already invested in these characters. We
Hmm.
know these characters. They've permeated into pop culture. You don't even
Hmm.
have to read the comics anymore. People
Yeah.
know who Iron Man is. They know who Batman is. They know who
Hmm.
Spider-Man is. They know who Superman is. We just intrinsically know. You learn that growing up on the playground,
Yep.
as a kid. Like we want to see these stories. Just make them good stories.
Exactly. No, 100%. So thank you so much, Heath, for being on this podcast. It's been a blast. I really appreciate you, especially since where you are right now, it's after 2 a.m.
Yeah,
for you.
it's 2:21 in the morning currently.
So I honestly appreciate your dedication, and I appreciate everything you just said as eloquently as I could never. So if people want to hear more from you or read more from you, where can they find you?
Well, again, thank you for the compliments. I don't know how eloquent I actually am, but I do appreciate it. You can find me on Letterboxd if you want to see more of my incoherent ramblings. I have fucking plenty of them. I'm on Letterboxd at the one Heath bar or search Heath Lynch. Either one should be able to find me. And I also have a podcast called Franchise Paradiso, where our whole shtick is we want more original movies, but most studios don't give us original movies. So we just kind of revel in what we're force fed and we talk about big cinematic franchises. And recently we've been spending a couple months going over horror franchises. That season is about to end soon. We're
Mhm.
going to have a 2 month break where we'll do other smaller episodes, but we'll be starting a new season here in a couple months on a new genre film. That will be fun. We'll announce that shortly. But yeah, on Letterboxd and my podcast, Franchise Paradiso. That's where you can find me.
And both are strong recommends. Franchise Paradiso is awesome to listen to. Just the
Thank
banter
you.
is great. And you can
We,
find
we, we
me.
love to yell at each other. That's for sure.
That is true. And dunk on Foster for reasons I don't understand. Poor Foster.
I think we all just kind of like dunking on each other and especially dunking on Rowan.
And you can find me on lostinmovies.co.uk or Letterboxd in Movies Lost. But thank you so much for listening to this podcast, which is a part of a SPDM Crew podcast. Until next time, bye bye.
Bye.